Hello there, fellow 551ians. 551ians? No. Anyway, hello everyone. Um, I'm Dale Woods, and I chose my paper on the evolution of blended learning from 2008 to 2015. Um, I chose this paper partly because I'm on this committee at my district where we're looking into personalized learning and how to possibly implement that and what that means and things like that. But blended learning is a big component of personalized education. And what is blended learning? Well, blended learning is some aspect of mixing face to face teaching with an online component. And the assumption here is that blended learning is in some ways superior, higher student achievement, better learning, things like that, with a blended component rather than using only face to face or only online. In this paper, I wanted to go over this. There's actually 4 models of blended learning that they talk about. And I have conveniently printed this for you all to look at. But this gives a little bit of a overview here of 4 models that they're using here. So the first one here is the rotation model. And the rotation involves some form of, like the name implies, some rotation that involves an online component. This could be within the classroom. Maybe you have different stations, like there's a writing component and a reading component and an online component, something like that. But this can also include the flipped classroom. That could be considered part of a rotation model where there's an online component at home, but when they come to school, there's practice or classroom activities that the teacher has. So that would be the rotation model. Second one there, the flex model. The flex model is, think of it essentially as primarily online learning, but it takes place within an actual classroom and within a brick and mortar building. So there's an actual classroom location. They come there, they're taking most of the classes on course online, however, but there is a teacher present. So if the students have questions or need better understanding about something, they can ask the teacher there, although they're mostly taking the material online. Third one there, the a la carte model. This would probably be thought of most in secondary school or even higher learning settings where students are taking different classes, and some of the classes they choose might be completely online. Other classes, though, are face-to-face. So that's what makes the blended component in this case. Some classes are totally online, some are more face-to-face. And the fourth model is the enriched virtual model. And you would think of this as an online component and a face-to-face component within the same class. So in other words, the face-to-face part is not just like office hours or voluntary time with the teacher, but it is an actual scheduled part of the class. So I would say the course we are taking in 551 here is an actual enriched virtual model where we have an online component to the class that has to be completed, but we have scheduled FaceTime, scheduled classes that are face-to-face. And so that's the enriched virtual model. So these are 4 major models being used, and they're being used by schools and district in the real world. In other words, there's actual schools and classrooms doing these models, and with some success. In my paper here, or the article that I read, as I mentioned before, there's sort of an underlying assumption here that the blended learning model leads to higher student achievement over strictly face-to-face or strictly online component. And they base that, from what I could tell, kind of on a single study, that a single government study, that within the study they actually admit that there's really not a lot of hard studies, rigorous research that has been done on this. There are a few, but it's not a ton. And then some of them that were done, there were rigorous studies that did point to the benefits of blended learning, but there are also a couple of other ones that did point to the benefits of blended learning over strictly face-to-face or online, but they might not be in K through 12 education. So they might be in the medical field or maybe in higher learning, but not necessarily in K through 12. So there's clearly more research that needs to be done on this. A couple of criticisms of this article. I mean, that's one, that their underlying assumption is built on kind of a single study, in my opinion. The other thing was that most of the information, each, let me back up here, each model that was studied is done with a case study. And the information there, the data there, was primarily obtained by individual school districts who are using these models. Now, I think that's a mixed bag. One thing I like about it is that these districts are getting their own data. They're doing their own homework on this. I feel like today a lot of districts are too willing just to implement a program and then just wait for others to do the research, whether it's a university or some educational advocacy group or something like that. But it's good to see that these districts, in this case, are implementing these models, and then they're doing their own homework about it. They're introducing their own data and basing whether these programs are being successful or not on their own studies. So I think that part's good. However, the downside is I think it could be a bit anecdotal, right? It works for this district, but can this be now transferred to other schools or districts who try? Would they get the same result? Because every school, every district has their own professional climate, their own school student populations that can vary. So I'm not so sure that these studies could be considered sort of universal or not really considered as rigorous research. So that's kind of the downside there. This paper that I read, unfortunately, I would say it doesn't quite meet the mark of probably hard research that we were supposed to be doing, but I did choose it because I felt that it worked well with something I have to do at my district, but also had some interest, I think, for things we were learning in this course. I would say this paper is a great resource if you want to know what blended learning is, what these models are, and if you want to know how they're sort of being implemented and used in the real world settings, in real classrooms, real districts, in different locations throughout the country. It's not good if you want to use it as hard research or hard proof of the benefits of blended learning over other types of learning that could be going on. So that's my case. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, dwoods@orangeusd.org, and I will see you all in class. Thanks.